Good evening, bonsoir, guten Abend, buenos tardes, goedenavond, e buena notte. That's kind of all languages I know, but you know what I mean, I guess. Welcome to another live stream, and I see that some are already there. Hi, Katrina. Hi, Roseanne. Hi, Ellie, of course. I'm missing your menu, by the way. And hi, Luke. I hope you didn't destroy our alliance while I was preparing the live stream. And hi, Roisin, was it, right? Sorry for that, but it's difficult when I read the name, you know that. And hi, Hans-Joachim. Of course, today I quickly in the beginning have to recap something I talked about in one of my videos this week, and that is another delay of the Brexit checks for imports from the EU, because that is really something very interesting, because originally they were announced for January 2021, and now we have the fifth delay in 3 years. And of course the EU has been implementing the checks in January 2021, and now the British government and some experts there say there would be painful consequences of Brexit if they would get those checks. But that was to be expected for Brexit. When you exit a single market, of course, you have the whole single market, so to speak, becomes a third country for you. And of course, everything that comes in from there, in this case now from 27 new third countries, that has to be checked. I mean, in my video this week, I talked a lot about why checks are important. And somebody said something in one of the comments I didn't say that clearly, but to be honest, importers in the EU that are not keeping that stuff in the EU could just then send stuff from China to the UK that is not okay in the EU and probably wouldn't be okay in the UK, but nobody's checking the stuff when it comes in. So they can just order stuff in China that's not very appropriate and send it to the UK, and no one is checking. If they call that taking back control, then I'm really worried, because health and safety checks on imports are very important, even if it comes from the EU, because that it comes from the EU doesn't mean that it fulfills the standards from the EU if it goes to a country that has either not the standards, which are still a lot on this planet, or that doesn't have any checks in place. But the interesting part about this was, there was, with the announcement that there is a fifth delay, there was an announcement what the British are doing from what point in time. I talked about this in the video as well. But in the end of this release, there are always, when governments bring out some releases for the press, there are some comments for editors in the bottom of those often. And there was one interesting one, emphasizing a point that was in the text already, but emphasizing the point that the British government now themselves said that Brexit is fueling inflation. And that was the most interesting part of the whole thing. For how long have Brexiteers and Tories, I know often they are the same, but nevertheless, said that Brexit is not harming the UK economy? And now the government, the pro-Brexit government, is saying that Brexit is fueling the inflation. I'm looking forward to Brexiteers denying that in the future, because we have it black on white from their own government. And that was the most interesting part about this. And of course, food inflation goes up if it's more expensive to import that food. And experts didn't have to tell me that this is the case, because if you import stuff with checks, of course that's more expensive. And yes, There were a lot of questions about this in the comments as well. I'm absolutely sure that some smaller exporters from the EU will stop exporting to the UK from this point because it's too big of a fuss for them. Too expensive, they would need more personnel because they usually only export to other EU member states, and that's why they exported to the UK in the past, because it's quite easy to do so with very less bureaucracy. And now they will face a lot of bureaucracy, and I'm quite sure they will definitely stop exporting to the UK because of all the fuss that's accompanied by it. And so Brexit will have an even higher impact on inflation there, because if you have less that is offered, that's market economy, and the demand stays the same, that also means the prices go up, not only because of the costs of the import, but also because there's less on the market, and that always drives prices up. So will be very interesting to see how they want to discuss against that in the future. Just taking a quick look, because there was just a recap. Hi Chatterette and hi Sock Juice, you also joined. Nice to see you again. And I hope I haven't missed Ellie's menu in the meantime. But she probably didn't write it, otherwise I would have said next week no live stream, I have to go to have dinner at Ellie's. I definitely should have said that last week. Nevertheless, it's quite nice to see you all again. And it's 10 people now, and I'm absolutely not bothered by the number, because, as I said, I like doing those live streams. That's why I wanted to start them again for the ones joining us. And I must have lost something. Push. Okay. Nevertheless, and afterwards a lot of people watch it. I know Sunday evening is not the best time for a live stream, but when I started them, there were a lot of live streams about Brexit, and so I had to pick a time where I can guarantee most of the times that I can do it, and during the week it's very hard to do so because of all the political appointments. And on Friday evening there's Max, and I don't want to put a live stream up against another YouTuber on the same topic. That would not have been a nice move when they've been there earlier. And so in the end it ended on Sunday evening, because that's the most likely date that I can do a lot of live streams during the year. Not every time, as you've seen on my birthday weekend, but a lot of times. And there are always those little things during the week that are happening that are not so big news to make a single video on them, because you can't talk about this too long except when you just drag it. But there are all these small snippets or still important things that shouldn't go under that I can bring in the live stream, and that's why live streams are quite important as well. One of those news this week, and a very fresh one, for example, was the resignation of Secretary of Defense Ben Wallace, because we all knew this. He has said it in the summer that he would do it at the next reshuffle or latest at the elections. But now he has resigned, and Sunak has made Energy Secretary Grant Shapps the new Defense Secretary. And that is quite a shame, because, to be honest, Ben Wallace was the only one I would call a reasonable member of this government. And he did a lot of right in the connection to the war in Ukraine, in the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. And this indeed is a loss for Britain, to be honest, because he was a very good minister. I was surprised already when he said at the time after Liz Truss, and we talk about Liz Truss later as well, that he is not running for Prime Minister for the post of the head of the Conservative Party. That was disappointing already, because that could have brought some reason there, although with the forces in the background, obviously, it wouldn't have been easy. But he was a really good minister. And Grant Shapps, we will have to see. He's kind of the all-rounder weapon of British prime ministers in the last years. And we will see if he really, as he said on Twitter at least, or on X, that the British support for Ukraine will continue as it was. And he called Putin's war against Ukraine a barbaric invasion. But as I said, Wallace has officially submitted his resignation, and he gave private reasons for this, and he already said so in the summer. And the successor for Grant Shapps, who was energy minister, will be Coutinho, like is the football player or football coach? I forgot. But she has been Secretary of State for Education so far, so we will see how that will work. You could say that the Department of Education is not doing a very good job, though. That's why I put another topic right behind that, because we here in Germany got the news that the UK Department of Education has temporarily closed more than 100 English educational institutions, because the concrete used is considered unsafe, and a number of classes have to move in the next school year. So that means that a few days before the start of the new school year, rooms and buildings in dozens of schools, universities and kindergartens in England had to be closed due to the risk of collapse. And the British Ministry of Education said that the institutions with buildings that contain a certain type of aerated concrete are affected. And a minority would have to go to completely different accommodations. From the 1950s to the 1990s, the material RAAC, that's reinforced aerated concrete, was used extensively in the construction of schools and colleges, mostly in the form of panels on flat roofs, but occasionally in pitched roofs, floors and walls, according to the BBC. And in 2018, after authorities had identified the potential risk of collapse over time, the ministry already alerted schools that action was needed to reduce the danger. And work had been done in many schools, but 104 facilities have done nothing. And that's the reason why now the Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said that something had to be done now. And that's why they're acting now before the start of the new half year, based on new insights, as they say. But seriously, they warned in 2018. A lot of schools have acted and 104 schools have not acted, which are under the supervision of the ministry, of course. How are there new insights now? They just ran out the time. And they said over this summer there was a case for a reason for concern. Well, obviously there was concern in 2018 already, otherwise they wouldn't have warned them all. So great work here again. And now they promise financial support to the schools to carry out the most urgent work. But the trade unions and the opposition parties have criticized the government's handling of this issue, and they accuse them of acting too late, and I would say rightly so. And there are more than 20,000 schools, colleges and daycare centres in England. And there we have the point again that the British government is also responsible for England. And so maybe some purely English topics are not ranking too high in the importance. It's an interesting system anyway. If I would think about that let's take the most populated or the biggest state in Germany. That's either my home state of North Rhine-Westphalia as the most populated, or Bavaria as the biggest, that the central government would also run this state. Nobody here would be very happy with that, I can tell you. And that's exactly what's happening in England. Scotland has a devolved government, Wales has a devolved government, Northern Ireland should have a devolved government, but England doesn't have its own government. It is run by the central government that has more to look at. So why is there not a, so to speak, English state government? And I think things like this would be easier to be prevented if they had their own government. But only just because they make up the most of the population of the UK. Well, if that's a reason, I don't know. Or they were always sure that at some point they would lose Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and so they would remain as the English government anyway. I mean, many people are talking about Little Britain. Yeah, thanks, Katrina. Scotland has mostly rebuilt all those schools. Would have been one way to go, depending on the budget, of course. We have a lot of trouble here in my hometown, for example, at the moment, that we can't build schools fast enough to accommodate all the children. So we are also using with container solutions at the moment, because building needs so much time. But a school like that would have been closed here, I'm quite sure, in 2018 and replaced by containers until it would have been scrapped and rebuilt. But we wouldn't have let the children in there when the government already brought out a warning. Oh, Ellie, yeah, I knew that would have to come from you. If Bavaria was run by the central government, that would make Söder superfluous. Ellie thinks it's maybe not that bad at all. Well, you can have different opinions. I'm not a big friend of Söder, but I prefer him to a lot of other possibilities. And to go astray a little bit from British politics here now, because Ellie brought it up, he, in my point of view, did a very good job today. There's, for those who are not from Germany, there's a scandal at the moment in Bavaria with the deputy prime minister and minister for economics with something he did in school when he was 16. Because he was 16, I would just call it some Nazi BS out of the head of a little stupid 16-year-old. I mean, if I would meet my 16-year-old self nowadays, I would honestly hit myself. So if you do something when you're 16 and the next 35 years you don't do crap like that, of course there was a big campaign against him and so on. But Söder, as much as I disagree with him in many places, did a very good job in dealing with the situation. And today he made a decision to keep this minister and deputy prime minister. And his reasoning was absolutely great, I must say. I never agree with Söder very much, but he did a very good job there. So in this place, Ellie, I'm glad that Söder was there and was handling the situation with reason. And we have elections in Bavaria very soon. Just a little side story, because I was asked that yesterday evening. I wasn't in the theater yesterday, by the way, as I announced last week. Our civil servants messed up an email, so they somehow got an apostrophe in my email address, and so I never got the email weeks ago. After we talked about this before, and then I should have gotten an email that says that I have to be in charge as district mayor yesterday evening for a big event in the jubilee year of the 375 years of Westphalian peace. For those who don't know what it is, the Westphalian peace ended the 30-year war, and the peace was made in my hometown Münster and in Osnabrück. And that was 375 years ago. And there was a big event in my district yesterday, and I didn't get that email. That's why I said I would go to the theater, to the season opening. But on Friday, they sent me an email, oh, you didn't have answered on the other email. I hope it's still, the appointment tomorrow is still up where you're holding the speech. And so I spontaneously had to write a speech and skip the theater. I gave my ticket to a friend who usually can't afford going to the theater, and doing a lot of voluntary work as well. And so that was fine. And so I still don't know what Mass from Leonard Bernstein is, but it was a nice evening. It was a big cultural day in one of my boroughs in my district, and in the evening there was the Peace Cinema. It was an open-air cinema. They are doing this in different boroughs, and the next week it started in my district in this Jubilee year. And next week, for example, they're showing in another borough, in another district, they're showing Pride. I don't know if you know the movie, but Pride is a movie that plays in the Thatcher time and the time of the miners' strikes. And gays and lesbians from London are collecting money for the miners to support them. It's an absolutely great movie. I've seen it several times already. I'm sorry I can't go there next week because I have too much to do, but that would be great to see that open air as well. It was one of the, by the way, Luke, that was one of the big screens from the company. You know what I mean. Nevertheless, that was about the going completely astray now from the topics. But it's quite nice anyway. But I held my speech there yesterday, of course, because the people there deserve it, and the Jubilee and the big Jubilee here deserves it, that one of the mayors is there and shows the appreciation of our council for all the voluntary work there. And so I was happy to do that and not going to the theater. But that means I cannot tell you anything about Mass by Leonard Bernstein today, as I promised last week. But that was a fun appointment. Now I have to go to a little not so fun back because I have more Brexit stuff on my list. You know, I always pick a ton of topics for my live stream. I never get to all of them, I know. But that's why I'm sorting them a bit, or try to. But one thing I have to mention, because we talked about this a lot, is the auto industry and Brexit. And in 2021, vehicle production already fell below the 1 million mark for the first time since 1953. I made a video about this. And in the years before the exit decision, the British car industry had even experienced an upswing. In 2016, the year of the referendum, 1.8 million vehicles were built on the island. And since then, it has just gone one way, and that's downhill. And those are consequences of Brexit as well. And the largest car producer in Great Britain in 21 was Nissan, with a 21% share of the number of the vehicles built. Then there was Land Rover and Mini with 20% each, and Toyota with 14%. But they stopped all the production there after Brexit, except for the Corolla. And Honda, who had a production share of 6% after they closed the plant in Swindon. And that did have a real big impact. And Brexit played a big part in closing that plant. And I have friends living very close to Swindon, and they told me that there are no cars built anymore where Honda was. There is now an Amazon warehouse from where they're sending out parcels. So the number of jobs and the payment for each job will be very different nowadays. So a lot has happened. And with the current numbers, and that's why I said the 1.8 million vehicles from 2016 are only 6-digit. That's as far down as it went after Brexit. And still, it's the same as before with the food inflation. They still want to tell us that Brexit is a big win for the UK. And inflation, which is higher in the UK than in other places because of Brexit, has impact somewhere else as well. And we talked about the rising interest rates for houses and homeowners and the mortgages. I talked to friends of mine about this, and that was a serious hit for many people. And some people, fortunately none of my friends, but some people in the UK are losing their houses because they cannot afford the interest rates anymore. I mean, if you have no long-term contract, of course, when the interest rates change, at some point you will get the new interest rates. And with the Bank of England raising interest rates over and over again, of course the interest rates for homeowners are rising. And it's then not the 5.5% from the Bank of England. The banks always give it to the customers even further. And that is quite devastating. But it had another impact now. Because now in the UK, house prices have fallen the most in 14 years. Because many now cannot buy a house. And as I said earlier, if there is less demand for what's on the market, the prices are going down. It's the same with less on the market, but the demand is going up or stays the same. Prices are going up. But there's less demand now because not that many people can afford a house anymore. And they even call it a kind of state of emergency at the moment, because real estate prices fell in August by 5.3% compared to the same month last year. And that means more sharply than at any time since 2009. And you know what happened at that time. 2009, that was when the financial crisis gripped all over the world. So Brexit and the higher inflation now has an impact like the financial crisis here. And they even fell 0.8% month on month, and that's twice as much as economists had expected. And they are not really, the experts are not really surprised, because the Bank of England has raised the key interest rate 14 times. And that means real estate financing is indeed more expensive. And that will put pressures on the demand for houses and apartments. And there has been a boom before that. But now the prices are falling, falling, and falling. The average home price in the UK has fallen to around 259,000. That's down almost £15,000. But the problem is, it's not a problem, as I said, for those who are planning to buy a house today and cannot finance it now. But it is also for many who bought their own property years ago. Here in Germany, we have contracts for 10 or 15 years. We have variable loans. We have no variable loans. No, the 10 or 15 years are in the UK. In Germany, when you're young enough, when you buy a house, you even had 30 years contracts or something like that. And in the UK, if you're lucky, you have 10 or 15 years, or you have variable loans that are really a mass phenomenon now in Great Britain. And even a lot of fixed interest loans often end after 5 years. And about every fifth borrower is said to have financed this house with variable conditions. And here in Germany, it's only 1 or 2% and not the 20% like in the UK. And that will mean that they will feel a lot. The key interest rate 2 years ago in Britain was 0.1%. And right now it is 5.25%. And a real estate loan now costs more than 6%. And they are now in trouble. According to the Reuters news agency, 800,000 British property owners will have to take out follow-up financing this year alone. And next year it will probably be 1.6 million. And it will even get worse because the end of the interest rate hike is unlikely to have been reached yet. Because experts assume, and I do as well, even if I'm not an expert, but looking at this all the time, that they will go over the 6% threshold at the Bank of England. And this would make loans even more expensive. And houses probably even much cheaper. And for example, the Resolution Foundation expect that interest rates will not fall under the 4.5% mark again before the end of 2027. And so that will be a really big problem. But I don't know if one of my Australian viewers is on today, because I learned while researching for this topic that the situation is similarly dramatic, but not as much, but similar, but on a little lower level, because they didn't have Brexit, in Australia. Because 90% of all buyers also have contracts with variable interest rates. The interest rate hike in Australia is lower though, and so the costs are lower. But the situation is comparable because of the variable loans, and that it got more expensive for about 90% in Australia as well. But they should really be happy that this is on a much lower level than in the UK at the moment. So whenever I look for my videos or my live stream, I always find these Brexit non-benefits. And I still have not found any Brexit benefit here. So I'm still waiting for someone to tell me a Brexit benefit for the UK. And I'm saying for the UK because, of course, some will come up with. There are Brexit benefits for the EU, not economically, but in the Parliament, for example, that they don't have to deal with Nigel Farage and his bunch anymore. There's no, as we Germans say, Extrawurst for the British anymore, and all this stuff, and no trouble on a lot of topics in the EU. But I mean, real Brexit benefits for those who decided on it. The people of the UK. And I know you will say again, no, it wasn't the people of the UK, it was the majority of the voters on that day. But you know that I always say, if you don't go to the vote, you cannot complain. You are as responsible as those that voted the way you didn't want it. And so the majority in the UK has voted for Brexit in the end. And of course I know the majority of the Scottish didn't, the majority of the Welsh in Wales didn't, and the majority in Northern Ireland didn't, but nevertheless the majority of the people of the UK in the end voted for Brexit. And except a few rich guys who definitely made millions, because if a currency is going down and you speculate on that, and even a bad economy gives you occasions to make millions on the stock markets. But except those few people who are definitely friends of the Leave campaign, who got a benefit from this? I'm still waiting for anyone telling us. It cannot be take back control of the borders. We know what happens with the immigration. But that's the reason why Hamza Youssef called it now the historic wrong of Brexit. And finally, I have something from Scotland again, because I was waiting for quite some time to hear anything from Scotland about the topic of independence again, because for months since Hamza Youssef took over, and in the beginning he talked about independence and the plans for independence and stuff, you never heard anything again here, at least not here in Germany. And now we heard that in a speech, Scotland's First Minister will make the case for righting the historic wrong of Brexit as he delivered a speech on independence. And on Saturday, he was addressing a crowd outside the Scottish Parliament following a Believe in Scotland march from Edinburgh Castle. And it was planned that the rally also included speeches from Scottish Government ministers Lorna Slater and Jamie Hepburn. And they said that Youssef would tell the audience that Scotland can get back on the right track by rejoining the European Union. I have correct something there. First of all, Scotland would join the European Union. Scotland as a single nation never was member of the European Union. And I know whenever the Rejoin campaign talks about the UK, some said it correctly in the comments, it would not be a rejoining because that would give a false impression of that it might be easier. It would be a completely new joining. So if Britain would join the EU, it's a rejoin in one sense because they have been a member before. But to put it really correctly, how the whole technical thing would work, we are talking, if we are talking about this at all, as a joining of the UK, which I don't see at the moment. And it would also be a Scottish joining and not rejoining. But in some parts, Youssef was right. Calling Brexit a national tragedy is not far from how you can see it. And he's absolutely right that the fact that it was forced upon Scotland against their will, he calls it a democratic disgrace. If something like this happens, I would expect, of course, not only if the states are affected, I would expect the states to have a say. That's why we have two houses of parliament. One, that's the Bundestag, that's like the House of Commons, and we have the Bundesrat. This is set up by the German states and the state governments. And on a topic like this, like exiting the European Union, the second chamber would have a say on this. And so with this, the German states would have had a say on this. And that did not happen in the Brexit referendum and the aftermath and the decision to leave. So there was no voting in any state-governed parliament. But I still don't get how he wants to do it. And that's my problem I have with the Scottish government since Nicola Sturgeon left. Or let's say at the point when we had the court ruling that said the Scottish cannot have a second referendum on Scottish independence without the consent of the British government. Since that point, I haven't heard anything really that could work about how they want to get to the topic of independence. And making the next general election a de facto referendum on independence was one of the thoughts there. But I don't still know how that legally would have said something. And a second referendum, even if Labour would win the next general election. I don't know. Does anyone from my viewers here believe that Labour would grant them a second referendum? Because Labour is against Scottish independence as well. So I'm quite curious. I have quite a delay here at the moment I can see between when I'm saying something and then seeing it on my screen as well. So that there will be a little delay with your answers if anybody believes that. But I don't see this happening. You know that I'm pro having the Scottish a say in their own independence or not. But I don't see how they can do it. Exactly, Ellie Starmer said no. And so how do they want to do it? they would need a constitutional discussion there, because it was a treaty of equals at one point, and now one can tell the other what they can do. I'm totally overwhelmed by that topic to find any way how the Scottish could legally become independent now, or in the near future, with both possible governments saying no. And that is my problem, and I'm still waiting for the Scottish government to say something about this. And I put something in my thumbnail today, which I couldn't completely write, otherwise I could have, and the name of the live stream that would have gotten me in trouble with YouTube right at the beginning, because a lot of people call the time Trusterf now, and I can do it that late in the live stream once without getting in too big of a trouble, I hope. But that is because we have kind of a jubilee now. Not exactly on the day, but this is the day of my live stream, so I want to talk about this, because Liz Truss had become the new Prime Minister almost exactly a year ago, and what we got there was chaos. And so people are looking back at the moment a little bit at those, let's be generous and say 50 days in office. And she is the shortest serving British Prime Minister in the country's history so far. We don't know what's coming in the future, but so far. But after her disastrous record at the head of government, she had to pack her bags again in October 2022 after just 6 weeks. And at the beginning of her term of office, she was committed to bringing the country forward. You know, she took over from Boris Johnson, that had to resign under all the scandals. And September 6th is the anniversary of Truss's assumption of office. And the British Guardian has taken this as an opportunity to once again outline the time she had in office. And the newspaper defined it as the most chaotic period in recent political history. And the Guardian journalist Aubrey Allegretti describes the first signs that appeared on September 6th as hardly encouraging. You will remember that Truss flew to Scotland on this day to meet Queen Elizabeth II and receive the official mandate to form a government. And it was quite a rainy day, fitting. And the weather threw a spanner in the works, so back in London she ended up giving a rushed speech that just was 4 minutes or 4 minutes 5 seconds or something, where she warned of severe global headwinds, but she promised that Britain will weather the storm. And shortly after that, we all know the Queen died, and most officials were busy with the preparations for the funeral. And would have been a perfect moment to get their team together, but as far as we know today, and as the Guardian writes, it seems as the team Truss had, they didn't even like each other very much. But there was a quote from a cabinet minister from the Truss era who complained about the lack of know-how. It was as if she had removed all the wallpaper and then the paint and the floorboards. There was practically no institutional memory left. And we all know what happened then. The financial market turbulence and the political confusion and the errors. Because the tax breaks planned by Truss government had triggered a financial chaos. You know what the financial market said about this. And public pressure forced Truss to end the project then. And then you will all remember the comparison we had there. Who would stay on the shelf longer, Liz Truss or a head of lettuce? And what newspaper was, I guess, the Daily Star, that said that the lettuce won in the end. the fun thing is, and I got this from the Guardian as well, Liz Truss was also given farewell parties to in the days to her official resignation. And she always said, and that's the sad part, she made the right policy at the wrong time. And when she did this at the parties, that's the nice thing after 1 year, what you can hear. A former employee said, when she said that, I thought she's completely insane. Yeah, but that's what other people said about her during her time in office. And you know, that Sunak then came and he has now been in office for more than 49 days. But we will see how this will end. He has no chance anymore to break the record with becoming the shortest running prime minister, but he inherited all her problems, and they will probably be out in the next elections, but that doesn't mean that the next one will be better. You know, whenever I talk about the next government, and if it's a Labour Party government, I don't see anything good coming from there as well, because whenever you listen now, with all the problems, is that Labour is not saying anything differently at the moment. Or when they say something differently, they counter it with saying what they're not doing. That makes the one thing they're saying differently impossible. Like the thing getting closer to the EU, but we will not do this, not do that, not do that. And so it's really serious that the opposition, and that means Labour with Keir Starmer, they don't have the courage to seriously counteract whatever happened in the last years. And that quite a year before the next elections. And that despite good poll numbers. Starmer criticized the fact that the Rwanda policy is not practicable and too expensive. But he always denies saying what a clear moral counterposition to the xenophobic attitude of Sunak's government is. And this not makes those attitudes from Sunak socially acceptable, but it also means that the pseudo problem that the Tories have turned into a crisis is becoming a real one in the general perception, because Labour is putting nothing against it. And when we get into the election campaign, Labour's silence on this issue may be a tactical maneuver in making themselves unassailable on this front, but the country is paying a heavy price for it. And the Labour Party will become entangled in the rhetoric of illiberal right-wing populism, and with this is becoming the Tories' accomplice. And it's also clearly shown when dealing with the so-called Public Order Act passed by the government. This law instructs the police to arrest demonstrators if they are even suspected of disturbing public order. In practice, this means that the right to demonstrate freely in England is not existing anymore. And you will all remember from my videos the coronation of Prince Charles III. And there were critics of the monarchy arrested by the police before they even had unpacked their placards. And one would think that a party that describes itself as left liberal, that's what Starmer and his Labour does, should actually defend the right to public demonstrations. Leading members of Labour said they would not repeal the law even if they won the next election. And when the Green Baroness Jenny Jones tabled a motion against a further tightening of the Public Order Act in the House of Lords, the Labour peers were instructed to abstain, after which the motion failed. Labour's fear of standing up for democratic principles in an environment radicalized by populist rhetoric only becomes fully understandable when you look at the British electoral system. Due to the fact that the first-past-the-post system is still in force, Starmer is dependent on a few constituencies that he needs to win back if he wants to win the next election. The main focus is on voters in the so-called Red Wall, who were lost to Johnson and his Brexit rhetoric in 2019. And that's this big majority they still have, even if they lost some seats by people leaving. For the same reason, when it comes to Brexit itself, Starmer is more than defensive. In principle, he recently ruled out a re-entry into the internal market without any need. And since then, he's become increasingly entangled in contradictions. Even his central mantra, "we will make Brexit work," is misleading because it assumes that the idea of leaving the EU was actually something positive that just had to be implemented properly. Some Brexiteers still say that, but that the Labour leader says that is unbelievable. Because by doing so, Labour is ultimately backing what the Brexiteers on the right fringe of the Tory party continue to claim, blurring the grim reality that Brexit itself was a self-defeating enterprise. And occasionally, this tactic also results in Starmer making outright false statements. For example, when he was asked in radio some time ago whether the UK economy would not be better off by rejoining the single market, his answer was a resounding no. That is a lie, a real lie, because Starmer knows that this is not true. And that is why I always hit on Labour here. I'm not a friend of these Tories, you know that. Although usually I would be with normal Tories, I would be on a same ground from in the case of politics, but not with these Tories. They are not a conservative party anymore. But I would have expected that Labour, who always advocated for a second referendum in the first place and all of this, and always said Brexit was a mistake. And now for votes, they are even lying. And that's what makes me angry about the Tories since the Leave campaign and those bunch of Tories that lied there like hell to get the Brexit vote. And now Labour is lying to win the next general election. So what difference will they make if they win? With that behavior, it will not make a real difference whichever of those two parties wins the next general election. And that is a major problem for Britain at the moment. And it could be a major problem for the turnout at the day as well. Who do you want to vote for? Those are the only two parties to have a real chance of winning the next general election with first past the post. People will refrain from voting Liberal or Green in the most cases in other places. In Scotland, most will still vote SNP even after all the trouble in recent months. But we would usually say here it's a choice between pest and cholera. If Starmer doesn't step up his play, this will be a very bad choice for the UK, whoever wins, and that is not good. Daily Rent, I just realized, is up again. Nevertheless, I have a quick look what you've written. I haven't done it for quite some time. Yeah, ULIS was another topic that came up again this week. Not only because of all the destroyed cameras, which is interesting as well. Octo, do you remember the number of cameras destroyed? It was quite a large one, but I don't have it in my memory at the moment. I remember it was quite a large number of cameras that were destroyed. That is something unacceptable as well. In the past, you never would have expected this, but it's the same with the behavior of people towards politicians, towards police, even firemen and people from the emergency services. They are nowadays suddenly being attacked by people. Something has really changed in our societies, and I'm not only saying in the UK, I say in our societies. A lot of respect is just gone. A lot of decent behavior is gone. And especially towards the people who are there to help us, like police, firemen and women, the people from the rescue services and emergency services. how can someone get an idea to attack those people? They are doing their jobs to help each and every one of us. I mean, politicians, it was something like this all the time. When I started politics, when I was in school, I was chairman of my local party youth group. And I already got death threats because I said something about some Nazis and a Nazi movement of that time. Today we have a different one. And I still get threats from that side. And I was topic on their local websites already because they were really angry about me. But nevertheless, that was something we had there. But then the attacks on politicians got always worse. And that led to politicians being killed, even here in my state. And in the end, it led to attacks on police, attacks on fire brigades, attacks on emergency services. How could people lose decent behavior like this? A lot of people say that social media is playing its part in it because it takes away barriers, because in the anonymity of the internet, and I know this, of course, from the comments of my videos, people think they can say everything they want. They never would have done 10 years ago face-to-face. But now they are saying all this on the internet. And this habit on doing this on the internet is slowly more and more transferring into the real world and their behavior in the real world, because those internal barriers are gone against such behavior. And that is something that in all our societies is becoming a real problem. Of course, I can cope with all the attacks on the internet here in the comments and so on. I don't even see the most because YouTube is already blocking them, and I don't have the time to go through thousands of comments every day that are on the block list by YouTube. I know that some comments are wrongly there, but there are so many that are, because a lot of trolls are posting as well every day whenever I publish a video, that I don't have the time to release your comments. If any of yours ended up there wrongly, because the system is doing that automatically already, then I'm sorry, but I will not have the time to release them. It's just too many. But that is one of the signals I wanted to say. There are so many comments you wouldn't say. Well, a decent person wouldn't say that in the face of somebody, but writing this in the anonymity with some nickname to people obviously is not stopping them. But honestly, I'm not bothered. I know that I have a lot of decent viewers that are having good discussions. I'm blocking the extreme ones. I'm seeing, of course, as well. Ellie, you definitely also know what I'm talking about. As soon as I see them, and I kick them out. But most people, and I don't care from which side, of if they're pro-Brexit, against Brexit, or don't care Brexit, as long as they have decent discussions. And with decent discussion, I don't mean just repeating a few headlines. I mean decent discussions in the comments. That is what we all want. We want to have a proper fact-based discussion. But people who are unable to behave like a decent human being, they have no place in the comments of my channel. Talking about comments and channel, by the way, a really big thank you, Murgi, so to Luke, for helping me a bit out with the commands today. And that's really a big help, because I always forget typing when I'm doing this and having a look out. So thank you very much. I hope you brought the little Commodore so he could get some sleep. I told you it's working. When I talk, he can sleep. And that you get a lot of sleep tonight. But we see us in a second. Again, I know all new events have started an hour ago when I started the live stream. I will have a look in a few minutes what happened. But that leads me to remind everyone of the new Outside Views STFC channel. And this time I'm typing it myself. if I can. I'm going blind, I guess. If you haven't visited me there yet, you might want to do this. It's growing. I got more than 100 videos there already on that channel as well. And that, although I just started it, I don't know, 10 weeks ago or something, or 8 weeks. And it's doing quite well, and it's fun. And I need to work a lot on this next week as well. And I will let you know how this develops. But if you haven't visited me there, maybe consider doing that. It's quite fun for me. It's more like live streams. I have nothing scripted there because that's coming from my spare time, enjoyment, and so I really enjoy this and make the videos on the go. Of course, sometimes I might forget something, but it's supposed to be fun. It's a game, and the videos are supposed to be a little help for those who are starting, for example, or who have missed out on something. Mugi, you know what I mean? I'm just saying reputation losses. And it's just fun to have something completely different from politics. But you know that if you want to know more about politics, there will be a next video tomorrow morning. I was happy to see you all again on this live stream, and I wish you a nice rest of the Sunday. For today, I will say good night and see you tomorrow. I'll be back.